Perfect. All right. So I know some of y'all were a part of the chat when Allie put kind of the things of what we were trying to figure out with payments and RCF. And I obviously was not even on the platform, so didn't see anything of responses or anything.
There were a lot of responses, let me tell you. Not
Okay.
all bad, not all bad. Basically, yeah.
So
We try to
go
keep it
ahead.
as simple as possible. And I'm sorry if there was any confusion or like whatever. We're just trying to streamline some things. But anyways.
And to give y'all kind of the why behind that, this is also why I will not do payment plans for my course. It is a nightmare. It's a nightmare having monthly membership fees.
Yeah.
Y'all don't really see what Allie does behind the scenes, but all of y'all's charges come on at different dates. It's not the same for every person. So Allie every day was having to go in and there would be a failed credit card transaction or a failed payment, and then trying to contact that person specifically and it not being communicated. Like that's all the things that y'all don't necessarily see behind the scenes. And so she had mentioned like doing a once every 4 months to minimize that. And it just wasn't working.
Yeah. Because the other
That
part of that,
Go ahead.
I was going to say the other part of that that makes it so complicated is Practice Better is just not a platform that is really great at like notifying. Like so many of you guys were like, I'm so sorry. I feel so bad. I did not know. And I was like, don't feel bad. Like we don't think that you guys were just like, running off being like, hey, we're doing this for free. Like we don't think that at all. Practice Better is just really like, it doesn't say like, hey, your card has expired. Like, can you whatever, add in a new one? And it doesn't allow us to really easily like add a card. So like some of you guys, I would have to be like, then can you now fill out the like credit card form? And then I would have to manually like write down your card number and then type it in and then like rip it up into pieces. You know what I mean? So it's just like, I would try and do this like for 4 people and it would literally take me like 2 hours. And I'm just like, oh my gosh, I cannot do this because this is just like insanity. So then I had our assistant help us. And then it was just kind of like, okay, we need to work smarter, not harder. And this is not working. But anyways, all to say, Emily has an
Right. So I obviously was not feeling it as much as Allie because Allie does all that in the backside of things. And I was like, dude, delegate it. Have somebody else do it. And so that's what we're doing in the meantime. However, we have found that housing information, as far as, and y'all probably feel this too, with the PowerPoints and the videos, like it's hard to find. It's hard to find. It is. And it's like we've done our best to try to like orient them in modules. But Practice Better is just not really meant for programs. So what we're kind of planning doing, and this is going to be over the course of time, not right away, because it's going to take us a lot of time and effort, is basically consolidate all of the most important bulk information and probably move it to our RCF Squarespace website on a month-to-month membership basis. If you want to be a part of that, you absolutely can if you want continuing learning. If you don't want to be a part of that, starting, let's see, March, April will be the last time we take monthly membership payments within Practice Better. We will be doing away with the monthly membership. In doing so, we're also going to be doing away with the week-to-week live calls. Allie and I talked about this for a long time. We may still offer like a once-a-month call within the Squarespace membership platform, but we would rather, instead of, hey, let's put together information in this week time to meet with them Monday, really think on what is everybody needing as a whole and offer the Q&A platform plus overall consensus of information more on a once a month basis. So if y'all want to join that, you can. If not, you don't have to. The thing that won't change is all of y'all will still be able to book one-on-ones, even if you're not paying for the membership within our Practice Better platform. So you may say, hey, I want to continue to book with y'all on Wednesday mornings. I don't necessarily need the calls and education. So I'm just going to house right here and we will stop all membership payments. The last one will be in April. So that means that our very last call will be the last Monday of April. We will not be continuing our Monday calls beyond that. There's a lot of reasons that go into that. But that's kind of the gist of the right now. It's not to say that people can't choose, and we've talked about like y'all housing community calls, talking amongst each other, but it just, with where the calls are going, and even last week with the nervous system, saying, hey, what'd y'all write down for your questions? and it's crickets. So that's very hard for me to facilitate a type of call. And it also because I don't hold maybe that anointing in that area, right? And I also know on a public platform, it's sometimes difficult for someone to be vulnerable. I would be too, and say, hey, this is my junk. This is what I'm dealing with. This is what I wrote down. That's hard on a live community call. It's much easier in smaller groups, and we just don't have the capacity to offer that. We will be having Amy in the next few months, maybe spearhead something like that, but that's kind of our reasoning behind everything. But we will still do probably once a month or periodic Q&A calls where y'all, if you're in the Squarespace membership, can come on. The cool thing about Squarespace is it's very easy to navigate. It'll be sort of like a digital library where you'll log on and see the organ folder with all the organs, and I'm going to re-record everything with the documents streamlined, and then nervous system and root causes and things that will be easier to navigate and for y'all to find will be contained for
and
you.
we want to be able to have like search features, you know, where it's like you can search the website and type in gallbladder, and all of a sudden you have maybe like an article or a call or a PowerPoint or something. So it really is going to be just like a much better, efficient way for you guys to access the information, because that's what I also feel like Emily said is so challenging. No matter how I've tried to like navigate Practice Better, it's just not set up that way. And it's really difficult to like make it so it's like, oh, here's all the information. Like I guarantee there's like some information that is in all this stuff in the modules that you guys are like, oh, that's where that's been this whole time. Like, and it's not your fault. I don't think it's our fault either. It's no one's fault. It's just, it's a hard system to navigate. And so it'll be a nicer way to present everything we have for you guys.
If I were y'all, I would download, if you can, over between now and the end of April, any resources within Practice Better currently. All of that will be going away. Every resource within Practice Better will be going away to simplify, make things easier. We'll be taking the things that are most helpful and moving them to Squarespace. We don't have a set fee on the membership of the Squarespace site yet, but it'll probably be cheaper than what it is now. And it'll probably be offered at that month to month. It takes the hassle out of us, because if someone's credit card fails, they just won't be able to log into the membership site. We don't have to worry about it. So
can I ask a question?
Go ahead.
So when you say download stuff, because this is what I've always had a challenge figuring out, is it more like screenshot? Like some of the things are documents, but some of it is like a web page. So that's kind of what I haven't figured out. Like, do you copy and paste it, or do you just screenshot it, or like, I don't know what.
Well, web pages, you could go to the web pages, but the documents and PDFs you will be able to download.
Yeah, I'm going to change it, because right now, and the only reason why we didn't have it that way before is like, we're still, you know, trying to figure out like, oh, okay, what is the best way to like protect intellectual property? Or like, what is the best way to like make sure that like, if we change something in the future, you don't have an outdated PDF, you know, without being like, hey, by the way, we added a support here, you know? So like, that's the other thing that is going to be better on this other website, is having things so you're looking at it and you know it's the most current version. But for the time being, like all the PDFs that we've done between education and organ systems, we'll change that so you can download them, and you can save them to your computer, and just know that like maybe some things have changed, but maybe they haven't, and that's a good resource. And we trust you guys to be like, hey, if you're going to use them for something, just, you know, be respectful of property like anything else on the internet. You know what I mean?
And then as far as some of the questions coming through, so the calls on YouTube will also be going away. There's several reasons for this as well. The good thing about housing videos within Squarespace is I don't have to censor my words.
Yeah.
I can talk about vaccine shedding. I can talk about COVID. I can talk about these other things where when Allie and I have tried to upload those videos to YouTube, guess what? They threatened to shut down our account. So no go, can't do it.
Yeah,
Things
they did delete one.
Yeah, they did delete one of them. But we'll be doing away with the YouTube channel, mainly to, again, consolidate. Imagine if one of y'all were brand new and you saw a YouTube list of videos of 150 videos. You're going to be so overwhelmed.
They were not properly labeled, because
right.
I didn't really think about it at the time of using it like a resource library. We thought about it as like, these are the calls. I don't know what we're going to talk about. Like it's, you know.
Yeah. And then any of y'all, even as this membership in Practice Better ends, can still, I know I said this earlier, can still request consultations, and you'd request lab work the same way. We'll probably streamline it through Edie to take the hassle off Allie of writing the requisition forms, and you can customize any lab panel you want to do. And that's any of the labs. That's Dutch, that's mycotoxin urinary panels, that's the Quicksilver tri-test, that's blood work. Everything can be customized. I wouldn't even be surprised if Edie puts together a system where people can like enter it. Oh, she's so smart. She'll probably like do it in that way.
And then I think it'd be cool. I mean, just thinking out loud, but like, I know a lot of you have asked questions or always say like, hey, I want to run like creating balanced health for my son, or like my husband wants to run labs. Like, we consider you guys, you know, a part of our almost like private practice in a way. So we want you to be able to utilize that for people that are in your immediate family or you're working with on your own now. So hopefully it'll be something that's really easy. Maybe you have a discount code, or who knows, we'll figure it out. But
yeah, absolutely. So pretty much, so what we're planning on doing is all of the videos, or all the past videos, are going to go away. We want to consolidate, condense, and simplify, where when someone logs on, it's not an hour-long video. Most people do not have the mental capacity or time to dive into that. So simplifying things where they have PowerPoint to reference, we're not necessarily reading off, and providing the main supports and the nuts and bolts for some of these more complex topics. So I will be spending time re-recording everything.
Also, the other reason for that too is like, you guys have shared personal stories. You guys have asked personal questions. And technically from a legal standpoint, like, we should probably, if it's on the internet, be like, hey, do you consent to having your voice and face on this, you know, platform? Like, there's like, you guys have all been fine with it, obviously, and we talk about that, but we just are trying to make it so everybody's privacy is respected. And YouTube is just unfortunately not a platform that we totally trust for that reason either.
So that is where the program is going. And hopefully, if y'all have any other questions, feel free to totally reach out to us. We will be more than happy to chat and do that. And hopefully still do community calls once in a while and not feel the need to do them every single week. Do y'all have just any questions right off the bat on anything from that? You can type it, or the Squarespace membership is going to basically have all of our educational materials, videos, digestible videos, PowerPoints, case studies, kind of what we do in our weekly calls will be put in there. So that's kind of the goal. I also thought it was really cool. So we have several practitioner friends who, I don't know if y'all know Natural Nurse Mama, but Lauren Johnson has become a really good friend of mine. And she does the podcast with Dr. Charlie, and he just launched a membership on Squarespace for I think like $40 a month. And I had some clients say like, should I join? I'm like, do it. Like, I'm all about learning. And they're literally sending me like basically like a screenshot of him talking, and we're like, this is you in mail form. Y'all talk about the same things. You say the same things. You have the same clinical pearls. I don't know how this is possible. And all his are just videos of like an autoimmune video, a parasite video. And I remember he was like, this is going to shock you. Like, they did a screen record, but low ferritin can be parasites. And I'm like, our girls already know that. Just funny. So,
like it would be a good place. Like, he does like a ton of stories. If you guys don't follow him, like his stories, I'm just like, that's what he must do all day long. Cause there's like 1,000 of them, but like his answers to some of them are like membership. Someone's like, hey, where do I start with parasite cleansing? And he links membership.
But part of it is because of the censorship issue. Like, to be perfectly
that's
honest
part of it.
Yeah, and it's awesome.
But it'll be like a resource, you know, like if you are going on there and you're like, we get questions all the time in the feed of like, my so-and-so is going through this, like, where do I even begin? You know, that would be a great place if you type in that word that you're looking for, like, you know, I don't know, gallbladder pain or whatever. We're hopefully going to utilize it as like a mini database of just information for you guys.
In the long run, it'll be better in the long run to transfer it over.
So basically the a lot of the resources that are on Practice Better will be on Squarespace now.
Well, we're getting rid of all of those, and I'm redoing everything.
Okay, so it'll be everything redone.
Redone with things slightly shifted and changed to
Okay.
to simplify in some ways.
All right.
I mean, it's going to be evolving. It's going to take us a while to build it out.
Yeah.
But even things like basic, I don't know, like we have our DIY starter kit protocol, things that, you know, those are always changing, but maybe we have certain basic protocols of things that we can evolve, or if there's something new on the membership, like, you know, I plan on doing like a lot of, I don't know, even talking about like pregnancy or kids support ideas, you know, like how to use oils with your kids 101. Maybe there's like a resource, you know, for that, or a downloadable PDF for that, or I might teach a class on it. Like, who knows? I think it's going to be evolving, but we have a lot of options and kind of learning from what other people are doing. Like Em said, kind of seeing what other people have put together and seeing how we can kind of create the best version of that for us.
Yep.
I do have a question.
Yeah.
So there's a few of the YouTube videos that I kind of like saved that I want to watch like later. So when should I like try to watch those by?
Before the last day of April.
Okay, sounds
Yeah.
good. Thank you.
End of April.
Yeah. And if there's also ones that y'all remember that you're like, I loved this video, let us know. Because that will also help, because if you've seen the list, there's so many YouTube videos.
Yes. I think what I'd love to do.
Well, the blood work video.
We're gonna
whenever we did the starter kit, will that stay?
Everything in Practice Better will be gone. Everything in Practice Better will be gone. So things will, again, I'll re-record a basic breakdown, and that will be within the Squarespace housed.
And we may send a form to you guys because your feedback is so valuable. And I know, like, you know, Tina, you said like his membership is amazing. You know, even feedback of like, well, what do you love the best about his membership? Like, what did you love the most about RCF? What was your favorite video that we talked about? So maybe we'll put together kind of like a feedback form as we get closer to kind of relaunching this, to ask for your help on stuff you guys did like, what you didn't like, stuff like that.
Yeah.
What you'd love to see included.
Yep.
I have a question.
Yeah.
Sorry, my screen just disappeared. So Practice Better will be there as a shell, and if we want to book appointments through you guys, that's the only function it will serve. And the chat feature, or is that
That's
not?
the forums and chats, group chats will be going away.
Going away? Okay.
Yeah. I mean, I don't see it as like an impossible thing to keep the, like, obviously like private messages or emails. I mean, we have to treat it as like a manageable private practice, which the way that you guys ask personal questions and things, like, I don't think it's overly excessive. You know, Emily has like different boundaries for her private practice for sure, where, you know, like, you can speak to this, but like, I mean, her clients can't like message and get like direct responses the same day as much access as you guys.
Oh, if y'all only knew. Allie spoils this group.
Yeah.
My one-on-one
I mean,
clients know to give me a 5 to 7 day turnaround time. Just a heads up.
so like, I don't think that that's impossible. The thing that's impossible or harder, I don't say impossible, is harder for me is showing up on specific times of like, you know, like today, my babysitter canceled and, oh, I have class on Mondays now. I'm like, cool, love that for us. My husband's here because he came home from work and I was like, you don't have to do that. I'll make it work. He's like, no, this is your job. I will support you. So like, he's here watching the kids, but it's harder for me and stressful for me to like show up on timely things if it's outside of the realm, you know, of like normal. So for me to answer questions on the back end is not a difficult task, and I love doing it. So, and stuff, of course, you know, Em chimes in and checks the group chat and she responds to y'all too. So I think that we can keep the private messages as long as they stay manageable, because we're not, you know, like bringing on, we don't have a plan to like bring on other groups at this point in time. It's like, you guys are the core group of our practice. So I think that'll still stay, but the group chat, I think we'll probably get rid of, unless you guys are like, please, please, please keep the group chat because you want it for each other. You know, we could probably potentially keep that. It's just the level 3 membership with all the modules and all of that is going to go away. Think of Practice Better as like a client management system, which is what it was designed to be. So if you guys love the group chat, like, let us know, or, you know, I guess we want your feedback on that. We just probably might not be checking in on it as much.
Yeah.
But there's nothing wrong with creating and continuing community, and maybe we figure out how to do that on the other platform. Who knows? But practice better with the chat's probably easiest.
Another thing that, like, these are just things that y'all might not see on your end, but let's say Allie and I decided to open up one-on-ones again, right? Imagine if someone was brand new and then they wonder why they're not in a group chat with other people we've worked with. That creates a lot of discord a little bit. And then also if they're just working with us one-on-one and they're in a group chat and there's a conversation about a video or a YouTube or a thing, and they're like, what are y'all talking about? There's just a lot of disconnect that can take place there. So we have to think about those types of things that y'all may not see on your end. Because people communicate, right? Like if someone's in this group and they refer someone to work with Allie and I, and they're not in the group chat, they're going to think that they're being excluded. But then every person that comes in, they'd have to be customly added. So there's just a lot of things that are back office business things that not everybody sees. Another option would be for everyone who's been within RCF to get plugged into a different channel outside of Practice Better, whether that's there's like Mighty Networks, which is free. Like that's something I've considered, and you can house information within Mighty Networks. I don't know if y'all have ever heard of it, but that's a really incredible platform that's categorized by information chat. So again, we're not saying, hey, it's totally going away, but that's just kind of the reasoning and why behind it.
Yeah.
Yep. Okay, before we just move into spleen and gallbladder, do y'all have any other questions? I don't want to like blow past this because I know we've been doing this group for like a long time.
I know. And thank you guys for just being like flexible and understanding. And as we kind of make these changes, we're learning things that work and don't work. And we appreciate you guys being patient and sticking with us because we've loved it. It's the best.
Yes, I'm excited for the next phase too. If any questions come to mind as we dive into even education, just drop them in the chat and we'll go over it. Okay, so we are covering spleen and gallbladder tonight. And I'm going to share my screen with y'all. My co-host, Al.
Say that what?
My co-host.
I did it already, but I can.
Okay. No, perfect. I got it.
Okay.
Okay, so we're going to do spleen and gallbladder. One thing that I didn't really touch on much in this is the blood work markers that are impacted by the spleen and gallbladder. So I'm just going to kind of go over those with y'all first. If I don't have a gallbladder, this still applies because you can support with these supports. Absolutely. Yeah. So spleen, gallbladder, or lack thereof. And also there's a lot of people who get their spleen removed, believe it or not. There really is. So anyways, they're not organs required for survival. Yeah, Tina, mom had both removed. They're not technically required for survival. So there's a lot of people living without spleens and gallbladders. But when it comes to the spleen, this is when we did the lymphatic system. This is part of your lymphatic system. So as a result, when you have variations of bacteria, parasites, viruses, it's going to ultimately all impact the spleen. I would say probably the biggest thing that impacts the spleen is not viruses. Viruses can, but bacteria, like Bartonella and Babesia. We'll cover those in a second. So when you start seeing patterns of bacterial infections, that's sort of the neutrophil lymphocyte ratio that is elevated lymphocytes, low neutrophils. That should start being a clue for bacteria, not just Bartonella and Babesia, but also strep bacteria. So especially kids with strep throat, and even H. pylori is a type of a bacteria. So those are things that can negatively impact the spleen. As a result, you then may see white blood cells go high or low. Spleen dysfunction can shift the white blood cells lower because of the chronic infection load. But if it's enlarged, you'll feel if your spleen's enlarged. You'll start feeling the symptoms. It's basically if you can find your liver and gallbladder area on the right rib cage and you take your hands to the left, as you can see in this picture, that's where your spleen is. So a lot of people will say like, hey, I've got this weird like pinching or like swelling or achy feeling on my left side. That's where your spleen is located. And the largest accumulation it contains of lymphoid tissue. There are the cells, your fighter soldiers against various antigens in the blood that are found within the spleen. It is a site where like nutrient levels are extremely important because it helps with red blood cell formation, and it is also the production site of lymphocytes. So think back to that ratio we just even talked about and how it can be influenced, right? If there is an infection load, alarm systems going off, it's saying, hey, we need to form antibodies against this foreign invader. A lot of that stems from the spleen. Another important thing is that it stores and filters your blood. So if we have dirty blood, or, you know, think of the name of one of the, is it vegan or vegetarian, blood builders for iron? The name is blood builder, because we need sufficient levels of iron and we need sufficient blood to be able to deliver oxygen and information to tissues that protect us from chronic illness and future diseases. So I added this little tidbit in the bottom right hand corner because, just as a reminder, if your lymph system gets backed up, it's probably also going to cause spleen stress. So the symptoms of lymphatic imbalance, which we touched on that a few weeks ago, if that goes on for too long, obviously you're not going to be able to remove some of these pathogens from the body as easily. And so that spleen is going to carry the burden then of those microbes. So kind of just recap information to the left here, but it's, you know, removing that waste. It's helping make and strengthen and create those soldiers in your body to fight infection. Also can help maintain fluid levels in the body, similar to the kidneys. So it's very important for overall immune function. These are the signs and symptoms here for the spleen being kind of not happy. So feeling that discomfort or pain around the left ribs, overall fatigue. If someone is getting frequent and recurring infections, even in Western medicine, if someone has their spleen removed, Tina, I'd be curious if your mom ever had a doctor say like, hey, you need to be mindful of not getting sick and being on immune supportive things. Indigestion or feeling uncomfortable when eating, especially after larger meals. Pain that has spread from the abdomen to the left shoulder. Left shoulder pain can also be, we learned this in the NTA, liver stress. That was one of the points that we palpated, because if your liver gets stressed, it will then cause spleen stress. So now you have two organs in stress. Deep breaths are another, because the spleen, as you take that deep breath and the lungs and the ribs expand, it can put pressure on that organ. Symptoms of jaundice, including like yellowing of the skin. A ruptured spleen typically is caused by a blow to the left abdomen. So think of car accidents, fist fights, sporting events, and then that can cause some of the other symptoms listed here. Pain behind the left ribs, tenderness to the touch, even dizziness and rapid heart rate. And then sometimes if someone lies down and raises their legs up, they can feel the pain at the tip of the left shoulder as well. And then low white blood cells, low red blood cells, and then signs of immune deficiency. So those are kind of spleen symptoms and key things to look for. This was just a thing I pulled really quickly on some of the various functions of the spleen. It also works in tandem with the kidneys as well. So if your kidneys become distressed, again, it'll place added burden on the spleen. So all of these organs sort of work together, and one has to pick up greater rocks that the other has set down because it wasn't capable of holding it, which then places a larger strain on its function. This was some just facts about the spleen. So spleen with the thymus gland and tonsils, those, and even think of lymph, are typically the things impacted by some of these Lyme co-infections. Even think of the tonsils with strep bacteria. If someone gets a tooth extracted, what they tend to see is this streptococcus bacteria and Lyme co-infections. Most of your lymph is from here up. Your thymus gland is right here. Tonsils are obviously towards the back of the throat. So if someone is complaining of swollen lymph nodes, enlarged tonsils, tender thymus gland, continuously getting sick, itchy skin, swollen fingers and feet, the spleen can play a role, but also we have to ask why. Another important factor is emotions. So we've kind of talked about how certain emotions can present themselves in various organs. And the spleen is expressed through your ability to obtain and give emotional nourishment and support. So when these needs are not being met emotionally, then that can lead to things like turning to food for comfort, binging and restricting cycles, addictions to social media, fill in the blank with a lot of other possible things of what you turn to when your emotional needs are not being met versus when they are met, you feel nourished and supported. Spleen controls the sheen on the hair, and also when there's an issue can create dandruff on the scalp. Your digestive system, most people don't think of the spleen impacting digestion, but it actually can. Our digestive system needs fire and warmth, which is why eating a bunch of super cold foods or ice cold water is not ideal, because that's going to disrupt that digestive process. Even adding in digestive bitters can help with the spleen. At the anatomical level, the spleen governs the fascia and soft tissues in the body. So when that fascia is relaxed and not constricted, right? Like if all of us were here, I had to go to the chiropractor today because I slept weird and I can barely turn my neck over this right shoulder. And I just got off being sick like a week and a half ago. So even making the connection of what is your mobility? How far can you turn your neck to the left and the right? Do you feel tense in your shoulders? What is one of the most, and your neck, the common side effects of things like Babesia and Bartonella, a really tight neck and tight and stiff shoulders. So you think about the organ that's being compromised, it's the spleen. And if that's governing the fascia and soft tissue, then people are going to tend to be more tense and restricted, and their body movements are going to be compromised. They're going to deal with the inability to be flexible. This is me, by the way. I'm describing myself because yeah, I'm more of a tense person, but my background, the key thing that like put me on my tail was Bartonella. So that fascia gets interrupted and impacted. And obviously our emotions can get impacted as well. So we kind of touched on some of the root causes. Stress is obviously going to be a big one. Stress is going to impact each of the organs. Bartonella, Babesia, Anaplasma, Mycoplasma, Ehrlichia. These are all some of those co-infections. Viruses like EBV, mononucleosis, toxoplasmosis. It's a parasitic infection. This is an interesting one, and I was reminded of this recently with COVID, but the infection of the heart valves and the importance of when we think of the spleen and how it's supposed to fight a lot of these infection loads, we're seeing a lot of heart problems, strokes, heart attacks, pericarditis, myocarditis, and a lot of the root of that is some of these bacterial infections. So it comes back to getting that spleen happy. And then even some of the inflammatory diseases and red blood cell disorders like sickle cell. So when it comes to supports, the first thing is blood work. Y'all also have scans to explore what possible infections are at play. Typically, if you're experiencing symptoms, there's probably going to be some sort of underlying bacterial load. Pretty good chance of that. So someone asked, could be taking beef spleen capsules help? It can, yes. So spleen glandulars or beef spleen is one of the ways to do that. I like the brand Code Age. I think that's a really good one. There's several other brands that are clean, but here's what we have to be so careful on and why I'm not quick to recommend glandulars, because what happens if that animal isn't healthy? What happens if that animal had, have you ever seen cows? Bugs surround them. The mosquitoes and other bugs that could leach onto that animal, and then they pass bacterial infections. Where do those go? Spleen. I remember Dr. Allen spoke on this often, and when he has certain people that are dealing with severe Lyme or Lyme co-infections, he pulls them off of a lot of these things, right? Like beef liver, spleen, certain organs that are going to absorb some of that toxicity, because you are what you eat. And if we're eating animals that are fed poor feed or have these underlying infections, like that's directly going to you. So you just have to be careful, use your best judgment. I would not do it every day either. That's not something that I think is a very smart idea.
Someone asked me about thyroid glandulars and whether I liked them or not. And it's like, well, yes, I do like them. I like the idea of them, just like you said, but it's a quality thing. And that is something taking every single day. So I'm hesitant on that.
Yeah. Yeah. And mono would be mononucleosis. So if the virus isn't active, I don't see it hindering the spleen. So yes, antibody levels should be going down, but also if you've ever looked at an Epstein-Barr panel, very rarely do you see things that aren't elevated because it's prevalent like 95% of the population. You would know if mono is active because you would be exhausted and tired 24/7 pretty much. And like sometimes even develop cold sores and other viral side effects. So when it comes to supporting the spleen, think of lymphatic system. The more you can support the lymphatic system, the more you're going to support the spleen. The next thing to that would be addressing the underlying imbalances, which a lot of y'all are doing. You're addressing the parasites that hold on to some of this bacteria. Cordyceps mushroom continues to be my all-time favorite support. It's so helpful for not only the spleen, but things like Lyme co-infections, viruses, parasites. I absolutely love that. Lowering stress levels, even foam rolling, ELT therapy, gua sha, some of those are therapies for the lymphatic system. And then chase tree. So chase tree is another name for Vitex, and this has been used by Greeks and Romans to promote spleen health. And then albizia is typically used for anxiety, but it is known to help heart, liver, spleen, lungs, kidney, and pericardium. And then supporting the liver can also take the burden off the spleen as well. So all of the liver supports that we've talked about in the past can be helpful. Diet, I feel like I don't even have to communicate this to y'all, but eating high quality foods that help naturally fight free radicals versus make them worse. So processed foods, excess oxidized oils, all of that we'll want to avoid, and eating a diet high in vitamins and minerals and nutrients and antioxidants. Then moving on to the gallbladder. This is a tiny, tiny, tiny organ. It's getting removed, I feel like, left and right now. I feel like more and more people are like, I just had my gallbladder removed. And it is right next to the liver. So Allie kind of put this slide together of the anatomy of where it is, and you'll notice that it is connected to the cystic duct, the common hepatic duct, and the common bile duct. You also have the right and left hepatic ducts, and then the gallbladder itself has, I was like, that looks like fungus, but different aspects and parts to it that is basically communicating and working in line with the liver. So your gallbladder is storing the bile. It's a storage center. So if that bile is sludgy and it's not moving properly, it's going to develop into stones and lead to gallstones in the gallbladder, which is one of the number one reasons that people get it out. And yes, a lot of doctors will say you shouldn't have gotten it removed. Yeah. I mean, they're very quick to remove it. There's just so many things you can do to honestly save the gallbladder, and one of them is to dissolve those stones. I'll get to supports for the gallbladder in a second, but eating a high quality diet, if you wanted to do a liver and gallbladder flush, that Zen cleanse I recommended months ago, they have an option for one of those to flush them out. I would probably spend time dissolving them first, but that can help save the gallbladder. Another important part to the gallbladder, a healthy gallbladder depends on the parasympathetic nervous system. So we talked about nervous system recently. That's your rest and digest system that's regulated largely by the vagus nerve. So if we have poor vagus nerve function, then we're going to have poor parasympathetic tone, and then that can lead to a poor functioning gallbladder. Kristen said that cleanse works fast. That Zen cleanse does work very fast. People have passed a whole whole lot of stuff on it. Zen cleanse. Yeah. And then if you start seeing signs and symptoms of lack of fat soluble vitamins, or for example, one of the key symptoms of the inability to digest fats is sunburn. That's largely dependent on your fatty acid balance because your fat soluble vitamins need sufficient fat and bile production to be absorbed and broken down. But when the gallbladder that's storing bile is not functioning optimally, then that bile cannot be secreted to absorb and digest fat soluble vitamins. But what if, going back to what is the deeper thing, what if it isn't a liver problem with bile? You know, a lot of people go, okay, for healthy bile, just go to the liver. What if it's poor vagus nerve function? And that's the reason for the weak gallbladder function. So then supporting your nervous system, supporting the vagus nerve, doing those activities and exercises that can create a better gallbladder, which will secrete healthy bile and help you break down these fat soluble vitamins and prevent things like gallstones from forming to begin with. So gallstones, that's one cause of gallbladder issues. It's probably the most common, or at least in Western medicine aspects. Processed fried foods and cholesterol can kind of be influenced as well. We've talked about how the liver and gallbladder can influence your cholesterol, LDL, triglycerides, VLDL. Lack of bile salts will also create this issue. So bile salts, we also learned about this in the NTA, but bile salts people think are just TUDCA. It's not just TUDCA. It's, I believe, betaine, taurine, sea salt, and, oh, I already have them on here. Choline, taurine, glycine, sea salt. That's them. And betaine is often, you know, the precursor to even choline. So when we say bile salts, that's what we're referring to: choline, taurine, glycine, and sea salt. If someone is not on their gallbladder, they would probably want to be on either a gallbladder glandular if they do well with that, or something like Beta Plus from Biotics, or gallbladder ND or TUDCA. Sometimes even rotating them can be helpful because we need to be able to absorb our fat soluble nutrients, fat soluble vitamins. How do we know if you have poor vagus nerve function? We went over some of those symptoms in our nervous system call. I don't know if you were on that, but I would refer back to that call because one can be lower HRV values if you're not tracking it, digestive problems, inability to detox properly. We probably will save the call from guest speakers. So like Dr. Steph did a guest call all on vagus nerve. We'll probably migrate that over to the membership site, probably most of the guest speakers. If it doesn't have too much information or y'all's information, we'll migrate it over.
Another like random one that I always go back to is for vagus nerve is like a gag reflex.
Oh yeah.
I've taken a very deep dive on this one on the reasons for that. But yeah, even my dad actually, interestingly enough, has a very sensitive gag reflex, but gag reflex is very connected to vagus nerve.
Yes, it is. So poor gag reflex means probably poor vagus nerve function. So, you know, supporting the vagus nerve as simple as the free things: humming, gargling, singing, alternating hot and cold exposure, the gazing exercise we talked about where you put your hands behind your head stays forward and your right eye goes to your right inner elbow. You do it until you feel like you're relaxed or you need to sigh or yawn, and then you do the other side. And incorporating those a few times a day can be extremely helpful for rebuilding the vagus nerve. There's also essential oils. Vibrant Blue is a brand that has a vagus nerve oil that you can rub behind your ears that will help calm you down. And then Osea, I think that's the brand. They have like a whole vagus nerve kit with like all sorts of stuff. So lots of options there.
Also, craniosacral therapy is great.
Yes, that's another good one. Kind of already touched on that. So root causes of gallbladder problems. Part of why I think, I don't want to say the older generation, but the generation that lived through the no fat, low fat, I think that's a large reason why we're seeing gallbladder issues in that population of people. Because, and I'm always wondering, like in 20 years, I'm sure they'll look back at like certain things that are mainstream right now, even in the holistic world, and be like, what were they thinking? Like, why are they doing that? The further you get away from just common sense and a normal way of doing things, the worse off it is. So like I have said this from day one, people back in the ancestral time did not eat beef liver every day. They didn't do it. I promise you they didn't do it. And if they did eat beef liver, it wasn't in a capsule. It was straight from the animal. And people are like, yes, nose to tail. And I'm like, you got to go hunt those animals back in the day. They weren't getting lucky and like killing a bunch of animals nonstop all the time. So the further we get away from just normal ways of eating and a balanced approach and not being fearful of Brussels sprouts and broccoli, because that's what we hear online, which are actually very helpful in studies to help with cancer, then that's not ideal. So the low fat, no fat movement, I believe, played a really big role in some of these gallbladder issues, because if you don't have healthy fat, you don't have sufficient bile flow. And if you don't have sufficient bile flow, then it's going to get really sludgy, and then those stones will develop within the gallbladder. Here is why I think my gallbladder and liver had problem. Oral contraceptive. So birth control, in the way that it influences hormones, can put a strain on the gallbladder. Hormone replacement therapy is another, because we have to remember that those synthetic hormones that are coming in, your liver has to process. So if your liver gets slow, then that's going to also make the spleen slow, and that's also going to make the gallbladder slow. Viral infections. So someone asked about EBV. Yes, viral infections can also influence the gallbladder. Those ducts we talked about, I'll go back to that slide really quickly with the gallbladder. If you look at these ducts on that slide, those little things that look like rolled up tomato skins, liver flukes, can get stuck in those ducts. And that's largely why people sort of feel the tenderness over the right rib cage, over the liver gallbladder, or even certain worms, parasitic worms can go in and coil their way, and disgusting, I know, but they can actually block it. So it'd be like you trying to, push water essentially through a water hose, and most of it's clogged. And so you only have a tiny bit of bile coming out of the water hose. And then we have all the other bile that's getting stuck in the gallbladder. So those ducts are important, and parasites can definitely play a role in clogging them. So binders. Allie and I like binders. I think people overdo binders. I think that binders we have to take breaks from periodically and not do it all hours of the day. And the reason being, and Jess Kane talked about this on the Body Bio call, but we have to remember what binders are for and what they're doing. And if we are taking binders multiple times a day with the whole scheduling thing, and we're not also optimizing bile flow, and our organs aren't working properly, those toxins that are getting from the liver to the gallbladder to the small intestine, like there's not anything that for the binders to bind to. And so if you just have free floating binders in your system with nothing to bind to, that's going to inhibit bile flow. That's going to slow down bile flow. That's why I love when Jess Kane spoke to the fact of like adding in PC and adding in liver support and TUDCA and ox bile to really get that moving, supporting phase 2.5 detox and bile flow of the liver to optimize the effects of binders and make it to where they don't have sort of like a constipating effect. Yeah, and that's also why people sometimes feel constipated when adding in binders, because their bile is not flowing. So that's a key clue sign. If you get constipated on binders, you need more support for your gallbladder, liver, and bile flow. Coffee enemas, they don't always help with removing liver flukes, because the thing with coffee enemas, I would say what would help more is, why am I drawing a blank on the name? Colonics. Coffee enemas are only going to reach a very small part of that lower part of your intestine. It doesn't necessarily go all the way up. The reason that the liver gets brought into the enema equation is because the blood is filtering through the liver faster when you have coffee. Another thing that can happen is the bile ducts from the coffee can dilate. And so when they dilate, yes, that will allow some of those flukes to pass through. But really, you don't necessarily need to do a coffee enema to remove the liver flukes. You could do the high dose of TUDCA with kidney liver support or drainage essentials with that high fat meal. I think we've talked about this before, but instead of doing the gallbladder flush, someone could eat really low carb, and I'm sorry, really low fat for a whole day. And then the next day kind of fast in the morning. And then around, I'd say 10, 11, 12, when it's lunchtime, eat a big, hefty, high fat meal, avocados, olive oil. Those are two of my favorites. Make guacamole with like 4 to 6 tudka. And then 45 minutes later, if you wanted to do a water flush or an enema, you could, but those bile ducts will be open and you will probably pass stones and all the things. You could even add like some herbals to the enema that are antiparasitic that can help kind of kill those suckers off. So that would
feel
probably
like
be helpful.
Don't you also think that the enema conversation, or people feel like it's helping the liver so much, is mainly also because of just like the increase of glutathione that happens and the antioxidant support that happens, where it's almost just like,
I don't know. That's a
I
good
don't know.
question. That's a good question. I mean, I know it increases glutathione, which is extremely helpful, but I also think that it's eliminating toxins from the body, which a water
Well, no,
flush.
it definitely, yeah. I think it definitely is. I think with the glutathione aspect to it, I think is like the antioxidant support that people are like, oh, that also helps with like detox and liver and all the things.
Yeah. Another thing that's not talked about very often is overdoing some of these therapies. I had a client come to me who had done like 4 or 5 coffee enemas a week for a year, and homegirl was so depleted. She was so depleted. And that's the same for any therapy, whether it's ozone, coffee enemas, detoxing. If you don't give your body time to replenish and add in the healthy prebiotics, like we talk about gut plus and butyrate often, minerals, all those things, then you're gonna be left depleted. Your body, the gut flora is gonna get totally disrupted because it's flushing all of that out, which is why even when you read some of the healing enema books, I have an enema book at my house, they recommend doing retention probiotic enemas after coffee enemas because it helps restore some of that flora in the gut. So these therapies are great, but not in excess. And I feel like right now, like some of these therapies are really trendy things, but we definitely have to build in more replenishment for sure.
Yeah, even saunas. I mean, everything's great in moderation, but think about just how much you're losing and getting rid of, which some of it's great.
And Dr. James even said, I was like, well, I need to up my salt, that for like sauna sessions or working out when you're sweating that much, you then need 5,000 of, instead of 2,500 of sodium. That's double.
Yeah.
Like that's a lot to replenish, I'm like, okay, all the salt, all the salt, all the salt. Cause I've been sauning.
I mean, it makes sense. I have a friend who's breastfeeding and she's doing saunas and her milk supply is dropping. And I was like, it's the saunas. You're literally getting rid of all of your hydration, which can take your milk supply because it's taking your minerals. Same thing.
Yeah. So diet's going to be important for gallbladder. Exercise can be helpful for gallbladder. Stress and nervous system support. Castor oil packs. I really love castor oil packs. And even if you can't do a pack, rolling castor oil over that area, I think can be really helpful. Bile salts, PC, that choline's going to help prevent the bile from getting thick and sludgy. Taurine, love, love, love taurine. So part of TUDCA, it's derived from taurine, helps increase the production of bile. Bodyguard, this is one of my favorites for gallstones. So Bodyguard contains an ingredient called Chanca piedra, which many of y'all have probably heard of that before, for dissolving and getting rid of gallstones. So Bodyguard is awesome for that. And also any sort of urinary or biliary issues. Golden thread, this is another one that can help increase bile production in cases of like chronic gallbladder problem. It's also a broad spectrum antimicrobial. And then supporting the liver in general. So when we've talked about other liver supports, whether that's massage or eating digestive bitters, dandelion tea, certain other like organic Olivia just recently came out with a newer bitter as well. Those are all going to be really helpful for the gallbladder as well. Okay, so then moving on, let me do a new screen share. One of the things that is my goal to learn more on is what foods support, love you, Jane, bye. What foods support the different organs? So in Chinese medicine, how do I do a new share? New share. Okay. So your spleen, I only did the spleen. I don't have the gallbladder. Couldn't find the gallbladder, but your spleen, think yellow. Nourish, even from an emotional perspective, nourish your mind, nourish your heart, things that are sweet and yellow. That's going to help your spleen. So all of the foods listed here with the color and idea of yellow. So you might be like, well, some of these foods aren't yellow, not necessarily, but they have sort of a yellow tint to them. If you had to categorize it in a different, or if you had to categorize it in a color category, not necessarily animal products, but the color in itself, yellow, is helpful for the spleen. So when we think about associations and important things, we talked about avoiding cold or frozen foods. So don't put ice in your drinks. Also, unless your ice is filtered, mine's not, comes straight from the fridge, then that's basically tap water. Doing one thing at a time, taking a break, trying not to worry. Worry can weaken the spleen. Worry can also impact the stomach. Spleen can be connected to the stomach, so they're kind of correlated there. The associations, you can see there, look through them. So like even there's several Chinese medicine books that correlate the spleen with even the mouth as well. And then foods that can cause harm to the spleen are going to be dairy, wheat, cold drinks, fruit juices, processed foods, refined flour and sugar, cold raw foods. So, you know, there is a movement sort of like the raw till 4. It's like vegan raw till 4. And I'm thinking, at what point are these people's spleens going to just be not happy at all? Because it's like straight fruit juice and juices in general and salads that aren't cooked and no animal products. And I'm like, at some point, the body's not going to be very helpful and happy with that.
That's like a new thing?
Well, it's sort of becoming a new thing as the whole Beyond Meat movement is surfacing, and Kim K recommending the vegan diet. And so everyone's like, oh yeah, raw till 4. You basically only eat raw foods until 4 p.m. in the afternoon and only vegan products. So
I feel like my stomach is like bloating just hearing about it.
oh yeah, I don't know how digestion works with that.
Ooh, good luck to you.
I know. And then just some more foods that support the function. Kim K is the reason I stopped being straight vegetarian. That's awesome.
Yeah.
Oh,
I told you guys I listened to that podcast with her and I was just like, I don't understand. I do not understand.
Yeah, we're not trying to judge here. We're going to pray for Kim K, but her newest line has aliens. I don't know how I feel about it. If you look up her new Skims launch, there's alien models. So just be praying for Kim K. Kim K really needs salvation in her life. You know, Jesus loves Kim K, but what a testimony that would be. Kim K came to know the Lord. Be awesome.
Amen.
It's great. It's great. And then maybe her and Bill Gates would stop buying up all the chicken farms so that I can find my farmer and have my own land to create us all some healthy meat and chickens and eggs and things.
Seriously.
So they're buying it all up and killing all the chicken farms.
I put it in the chat, but Deanna Minnick is like a really, really amazing. You know her. I think we've referenced her.
Yeah. Colors.
Yeah. If you guys haven't been on her website or her book or heard about her, it's really, really fascinating. She does a lot with food association with antioxidants and colors. She presented at the NTA back when I went like for the very first time in like 2017 or something. And her stuff is just really, really cool. And it's like one of those things where you're like, whoa, I didn't even realize that.
Yeah.
Or like, yeah, it's cool.
Like what foods support what functions, and it's awesome.
Yeah.
And start paying attention too on, like, think of foods that you're gravitating towards right now with the season we're in. It's starting to be spring. Like think of what y'all had for your groceries this week. Were you naturally drawn to anything at the grocery store or anything that's more florally? Like when I did my hibiscus tea story on the things with the shedding and the spike protein, hibiscus tea has the same chemical structure as hydroxychloroquine, which is one of the drugs that helped with COVID. And I had so many people say, I had no idea it did that, but I was naturally drawn to hibiscus tea like the past few months. And we're kind of moving into spring with the hibiscus flowers. Ashley, siete chips. Oh, that's good. That's good.
That says a lot for you, Em, because you're not like drawn to tea.
Oh, I no,
particularly ever.
no, never. It's very interesting that I wanted it.
Yeah.
Not
Like my
once.
thing that I've been drawn to lately is like, which is funny because it's yellow, is dried mangoes. Like
Ah,
I don't
and
really crave fruit.
I've been craving pineapple and mangoes. Just
Yeah, I don't really do, I don't know. Fruit's just like not my thing. Never occurs to me to like, oh, I should buy these grapes. I'm just like, pass.
yeah,
But dried mangoes, something about it. They're just like a happy. They're just happy. I like the color.
I don't tend to crave fruit. I sometimes wish I didn't because I'll eat so much of it, but it is good for you. Berries too. Berries are very good for you. Lots of good nutrients in them. Lots of good nutrients. Okay, I think that is everything. I don't have anything else in my notes here for spleen. The only other thing I have that I don't think I touched on were, and I'll put it in the chat, but when in doubt, look up foods that can support these organs. So blood building foods, especially for the spleen. Think beets. Beets are a good one. In fact, if I could say like what's one food to really help your gallbladder, beets. Beets, 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 beets. The only way I will actually eat them is if I boil them on the stove and they get really soft and I cut them up and then I roast them in the oven with butter and ghee and salt, and then I top it with goat cheese and pistachios. That's the only way I'll eat them. Very extra, but beets are very good for your liver and gallbladder.
Yeah, that's actually what like beta TCP from Biotics is. Basically, it's crushed up beets, and it's like got taurine and I don't even remember what else it is. It stands for something, but that's what it is. It's a pink pill. Or
Yeah.
beet kvass is my favorite. I like beet kvass better than actual beets, but like beet chips, like if I had a dehydrator or something. Yeah, but I don't know. I think that takes out quite a bit of the nutrient.
Well, and did any of y'all else on this call go through the NTA program when it was the functional exam? Any of y'all? So they teach us the functional exam, or they used to through the NTA program. And we did something called lingual neural testing, where we would have our client, and I used to do this in the office in person with people, and there's certain points on the body that point to dysfunction. And so, like we said, like the left shoulder and clavicle area, this can help point to spleen and liver problems, gallbladder problems. If y'all can find the web between your thumb and pointer finger, and you start putting pressure. Let me see if I can do this where y'all can see it. If you start putting pressure in this area, if you're tender there, your gallbladder needs support. The web.
And was it called? The Chapman reflex?
I think so.
Yeah, like we would also like palpate people like on the table.
Yeah.
This is when I realized I was like,
I had to tell people or legally say, do I have permission to touch you?
Yeah, do I have permission to touch you? Yes, thank you very much. Okay. And then this was always like the hardest one because so many people were so tender, but like, on this side, or no.
The gallbladder. You have to go deep and under. I never did that
This
one.
side.
I'm gonna assume it's not great.
I can't
But
do it on the other side.
what I'm getting at with this is people would have, the spot on the left shoulder that's off, and then this web was tender for them, and then this was like tender. And you would put a tiny amount of beet under their tongue because all you need is a tiny bit for the body to respond. You don't need like to eat a whole meal of it. And this is also something y'all can try out. So we've kind of told you about the blood pulse thing. Like if your pulse goes up with a food, it's a sensitivity. But if you put it, like, let's say you're palpating this area, like, yeah, it hurts. And then you put some beets under your tongue. Wait a second, repalpate. If it lowers in pain, then those beets are actually helping the function of your gallbladder. You could try that with artichokes. You could try that with dandelion tea. You can try different things. Another one that is really common is IT bands, estrogen dominance. So if you try to foam roll the sides of your legs in IT bands and you're sore and tense and tight, estrogen dominance. So then what you can do is you can put something under your tongue, whether it's artichoke, drainage essentials, calcium D-glucarate, DEM, re-foam roll with it under your tongue and see if the pain is better. And it can say like, yes, this is actually helping your system and body. So it's just cool. It's cool how things can give you answers. Your adrenal points, we've talked about that, 1 to 2 anatomical inches above your belly button and to the right. If you rub in circles on that area and it's tender, your adrenals are like screaming for help. And you can put essential oils on that area that are calming, lavender, frankincense. It's not, I don't think it's called the tenderness test. It was
It's
just
called
our
the functional evaluation. That's what they
evaluation.
called it, but
Yeah.
I think my favorite was the first point you always do is like the HCl point. So like I have to like look at Emily to do it to like realize where it is on myself. But it's like if you have your xiphoid process, there's like a little underneath your rib cage where your ribs end, you'll realize where that is, and then you follow the rib about an inch down. And then you take your thumb and it's a point here. If you push on that on the inside and it's super, super tender, then you're technically low in HCl. And then if you would hold the HCl on your tongue or the other person, and then you redid it, and then they were like, wow, that's crazy. It doesn't hurt anymore. It's like, okay, body needs HCl.
And we would have scores. So there was an intensity score of 0, didn't feel anything. You could literally like punch it and it's going to be fine, to 10 to, wow, that really, really is uncomfortable. And if it only went down like 2 points with that support, then you could replace that with a food. So let's say someone's point of beta plus only went down 2 points with beta plus, then adding in beets or artichokes would be a better replacement. If it went 6 points or more, I think like 4 to 6 points or more, then that would warrant, food would not help. A supplement would be required to take them from a 10 to a 4 or something.
I'm sure if you Google like, because the forms that we have would not be helpful. It was like a whole thing. If you don't know what you're looking or didn't go through the course, you'd look at it like it was like a map from like, 400 BC and you're trying to find a treasure. Like it makes 0 sense. But if you just Google like functional evaluation HCl point or something, it was called LNT testing, was the lingual neural testing kind of. So maybe that would help it.
Yeah, if y'all search lingual neural, you may be able to find things. I think that the NTA is wanting to offer this soon again. They just couldn't because of COVID. Nothing could be in person. When Allie and I took the program, it was in person.
Yeah.
But yeah, those are little things that you can do. What was the spleen point again?
I don't know. Was there one?
Yeah. There was a spleen and pancreas point.
Oh, the pancreas point.
Same.
Oh, those were all the ones. This was where it got really complicated when you're like, okay, enough. There was like all these rib points, remember? Where like you would literally have to stick your fingers like in someone's ribs and be like, okay. Like it was just, I don't remember which ones they were, but those were the ones that I was just like, pass.
Here is a link that y'all can use if you want to read up more on it that I just found that breaks down the lingual neural process. It's from Biotics Canada. I don't know if it lists the points though. I think it just has the supports and how it works.
Yeah, I'm sure there's YouTube videos on someone doing it.
Yeah, I bet YouTube would be a good place.
But the other one that is, I double checked, it is in the resources document, but the cool one that we were talking about with the pulse test called the COCA pulse test. If you Google, I think it's COCA, COCA pulse test. It was like Dr. Coca is his name or something, but that's where you take your pulse. Usually they have you do it on your wrist, and then you take your pulse for 60 seconds, count how many beats you get in that minute. So say I got like 60. Then I would do it with a food that maybe I'm questioning. Like, I don't know if I do well with this food. So like goat cheese for me. Put it on my tongue, hold it in my mouth, don't swallow it, retake that pulse. If my pulse elevates, I think more than 6 to 8 pulses, so say it's like 75, then I'm like, okay, my body's immune system is upregulating and my heart is beating faster. I don't think I do well with that food. So that's an easy way you can test kind of what your body wants or does not want for foods.
You want to know another one, y'all, for kids? How to test their food sensitivities? So if you lay them on a table, they're laying down, just like, hey, we're playing a game. Yeah. You could put that food, whatever you're wanting to test, under their tongue. Before you do that, you need a baseline though of how flexible their legs are. So if they're laying on their back and you're holding their feet, make sure they're barefoot, and you rotate their toes towards the table, you're going to get a baseline. Don't force it, but just see how much their fascia, going back to fascia, spleen, bacteria, organ function, their toes get to the table. You're going to get a baseline. Then you'll put a food on their tongue. If they don't have as much flexibility, if their toes, you're like, wait a second, it's not going as far. That's a food sensitivity. Because your body will constrict what we're saying about spleen and fascia when there is a foreign invader, and that food is a foreign invader. Now, what's even cooler is wheat rescue from Microbiome Labs. Like, let's say you're like, okay, I'm at a restaurant, there could be gluten, and you know that they have a piece of gluten under their tongue. You can actually sprinkle a little bit of wheat rescue, or just have them hold the wheat rescue capsule under their tongue, and you'll see their flexibility increase. That's where adding in added supports can be helpful, or even things like takisumi, which binds to herbicides, and glyphosate and pesticides. So that's one way to test. The only people that wouldn't work for are kids who are hypermobile, where they like literally they would be, you may have to pull their legs off the table because their normal may be like a hypermobile state, and that would be their baseline. And then you would test foods. So that's one way. The second way, and I don't love this way as much because they can manipulate the result, but if you have a kid try to touch their toes, if they're really flexible and they can already touch their toes, you see how far down, like their hands or their head could go towards their knees. You're testing the flexibility of their hamstrings. And then you get a baseline. Like, it's really easy to do it up against like a wall and just put like a little piece of tape on a wall to see how far they go down or on the floor. And then you would put the food on their tongue, let it sit there for a little bit, and then have them retouch their toes. It's amazing for kids to visually feel, wow, when I have dairy or gluten on my tongue, like I can't touch my toes as much, especially for athletes. You think about that and the importance of the mobility for preventing injury, being able to sprint faster, jump higher. All those things matter with flexibility. Those foods inhibit that process. So that's another test you could even do yourself. I know I said kids, but the flexibility test. If you lose flexibility in touching your toes with the food under your tongue, it's a food sensitivity. Super cool.
I also like the adrenal test, which can tell you two things. Sometimes it's your hips are just really out of alignment, but I need a chiropractic adjustment. But if you're also laying on the table and you take someone's ankles and you pull on them and you see, do their feet add up like this, then adrenals are okay. If one of them is significantly, which most of the time, one foot is pretty like significantly longer, then that's a sign of adrenal stress. So take a food along the lines of adrenal support. I mean, that's what we were using it for, is like, okay, so what adrenal support could we add in? Or if you're like, hey, I have like 3 or 4 things that I'm considering taking as a supplement, try one, hold it under your tongue, re-pull those feet and see if they even out.
We had someone 6 inches off, and we put an adrenal glandular, Cytozyme AD from Biotics, retested their legs.
Yeah.
Completely came into alignment. So if you were told like, oh, I've always had one leg longer than the other, that's very, 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 very rare. It's possible, but most people, it's an adrenal dysfunction.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And some chiropractors always do that. I find like, they kind of pull on the legs to kind of assess some things.
Well, and what the most chiros do, they're like, let me jerk your body back into alignment, right? Like pull the leg, which is a stress to the nervous system. Like that's not ideal. You calm the nervous system and you really watch the fascia relax and those feet come back into balance.
Mm-hmm.
I used to do this in person with clients all the time before I moved virtual.
I did too, and I hated every moment of it. I really just did not like it.
I liked it because I did not do the entire L&T process. I only did the ones that I wanted to know.
Yeah, I did like 5 or 6, but I worked in a clinic where all the people were relatively an older demographic. And I was just like so worried. I was literally just going to like bruise them, or like, it just was a huge disconnect. I was like, this is not, and everything hurt.
Yeah. Well, and my favorite test, and I know it's getting late, y'all probably got to go, but one of my favorite tests was and I can't think of the official name of it, but it was the mineral test. So a lot of y'all have asked us like, what's the best minerals for us? You can actually put a blood pressure cuff over someone's calf. We'll send y'all the exact details, but you have someone else pump up that blood pressure cuff until you feel like you're about to cramp, and you look at the number on the blood pressure cuff. And then you slowly let go and you watch what it does. So, right, we know that cramping, think of what cramping is. You begin to cramp when your minerals are insufficient and out of balance. And so it's amazing to me. We would put like magnesium and potassium as the combo on their tongue and then repump it up. And if they started to cramp at, let's say, the 30 mark, they all of a sudden got to like 180 because they're restoring mineral function in their body. Their calf isn't going to cramp. And you can play around where you could try different like minerals and electrolytes on your tongue and do that, you just need a blood pressure cuff and someone to pump it up. There's PDFs with the instructions, like the L&T process, and figure out exactly what minerals you need and which brand is best for you.
I looked up what the name of it is. Do you want to guess? I'll give you a clue. Starts with an L.
Lowenberg.
Yes, Lowenberg.
Said that in years. Just come to mind.
Google the Lowenberg test for minerals and you'll see some stuff on it.
I honestly think, y'all, that's why I say like the body is so freaking smart. There's probably so many ways of tests like that, of like how we were created to know exactly what you need and when you need it and what you should stay away from in that season. Like truly. And that's why I always said, like, even sometimes if you hold something, hold a food, hold a supplement, if you're taking it day to day, you will feel your body either do a like a relaxation, or you'll feel yourself tense up. And that is like such a clue, unless you were to say like, okay, well, is there fear attached to this? If there's fear attached to it, you're going to tense. But yeah, that's how I take my supplements every day. Hold them in, see what if I need it. Because I'll feel my shoulders start to creep up if I don't, and then they relax if I do. Sometimes it's neutral. If it's neutral, you probably don't need it that day. It's not going to do anything. So yeah, cool little fun things. Y'all should now test your kids, little experiments, figure out what they can eat or what they should avoid. And then Wheat Rescue to the rescue if you need it.
Who makes the Wheat Rescue again? The Microbiome Labs?
Microbiome Labs, yeah.
Okay, yeah.
And no, it is not the last time to do one-on-ones. We will continue to see y'all one-on-one. You'll just request an appointment and we can meet with y'all whenever.
Yeah.
So
but we do have, for the November group, if there's anybody here from November, I think we have your last one-on-ones like as a part of your program next week. I want to say it's like the 14th, 15th, 16th or something. So we're going to, you'll be able to book those this week. Hopefully I'll get the times up in the next 12 hours.
Perfect. And then if y'all have any other questions or things you want to speak to or ask us regarding the shift and things, just let us know.
Yeah.
Happy.
I just want to say thank you guys for putting all the time and effort into these calls. I know I don't always talk, but I have so much saved and written down, and I appreciate them a lot.
Aw, thank you.
And I know it's a lot of work to do it, so.
Thanks, guys. That means a lot.
We do love it. We just want to make it the best for everybody, you know, and we've even taken into consideration of we never would want people feeling like they have to show up for weekly calls, be an added stress to their system, you know? And then like, let's say someone could make the nervous system call and we're referencing that tonight and they feel like they're behind and then they have to add that. So I think that once a month and even having a Q&A form where y'all may have a question, you can go right to the Q&A form, put it in, and then we'll talk about it on the call. And y'all can still ask one-on-one questions that pertain to you on those calls. So I think it'll be in the long run awesome for lots of reasons.
Yeah.
Can I ask a question before we hang up? So I need to do another one-on-one because I need to kind of get a what's next protocol wise, because I'm out of my, like most of my other things except for like Takesumi, which just takes forever to get through. But I'm just kind of curious because should I do blood work or should I do a scan? I know you don't do muscle testing anymore, but I'm basically like, how would you and or I know what's next? I mean, I know that you would know more than I would know, but
I personally love blood work. You know, I do, but for certain individuals where they have done blood work and we're like, okay, there's some sort of lingering thing that the blood work's not communicating to us. That's where I think scans can be invaluable tools to really point out, like, what are we low in foundationally? What are the actual toxins coming up? What do we need to target? So that's totally up to you. And also you don't have to get a full creating balance health scan. I don't know if y'all know that, but they have different variations. There's the full one, and then they have some that's just the remedies. And
like a remedy.
Yeah.
Remedies. Yeah.
And then they have some that's just the toxins and remedies. And then they have some that's the vitamins, like deficiencies. So you can alter what you get.
Okay. So do you think that it's better to do that prior to booking a one-on-one with you so that you can kind of know where to go from it, or not necessary?
What we've done with most people is if they haven't gotten blood work in a while, to start there. because that can communicate a lot of information. From there, if we feel like we need extra info, we could say like, hey, why don't you explore a remedy scan? Or based on this, what about a hair tissue mineral analysis at this time? Or what about, also, I don't know if y'all know this, but Dutch, people see the really expensive price. That's the Dutch Complete. You can get just the Dutch sex metabolites run, and it's $180 plus taxes and draw fees. So it comes out to like $195, which is way more doable than a $395 test. So there are other options within the larger tests.
And usually kind of like how we handle it, if you guys send us a message, because it is still so bio individual, like, hey, exactly. Like if you were to say this offline and say, hey, I want to do a follow-up one-on-one, I'm out of my stuff. Like, what do you think? Like we go into your profile, we look at all the messages that we've sent back and forth. We say, okay, you did blood work 6 months ago, or you already did a remedy scan, or maybe we do want to do the Dutch. So we go back through all of your files and documents and kind of be like, okay, what do we think we need here? And then we can say, here's what we think you want to run if you don't really know. So you can always ask us before booking, because the last thing we want to do is have you guys book a one-on-one just to be like, hey, yeah, let's do a scan. Like that's not worth anybody's time. And so if you're not really sure, just send us a message beforehand.
And custom panels we can add on, right? There's all those custom markers that we can look at.
Yeah.
I'm about to do my own new reviewed panel probably next week.
Yeah, I'm gonna do some stuff too.
I
Testing
love
fun.
They're fun. Do y'all have any other questions? Next week is the adrenals and the thymus. One of my faves. But anything else from this call? Kristen's gonna get her lavender. You better use it tonight, Kristen. Rub it on those adrenal spots.
Oh, you know I am.
It's funny. All right. Well, we'll see y'all next week. And yeah, let's not get anything.
Bye.
All right.